To proceed, like we said, we will be sort of acquainting ourselves with the different surahs of the Quran. Last time we talked about Surat Al-Fatiha. Today, inshallah, we will talk about Surat Al-Baqarah, and Surat Al-Baqarah is the second one in the Mus'haf, in the order of the surahs in the Mus'haf. Surat Al-Baqarah is surah number 2, but chronologically, Surat Al-Baqarah was one of the first surahs. At least parts of it were the first verses that were revealed in Medina, and it continued to be revealed throughout the Madani period. So from the beginning of Hijrah until the Prophet ﷺ ceased to receive revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this surah was being revealed. The last verse in the Quran is in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمًا تُرْجَعُونَ فِيهِ إِلَى اللَّهِ ثُمَّ تُوَفَّى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ مَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. And fear a day when you shall return to Allah and every soul will be given a fair recompense, and they will not be wrong done, or they will not be unfairly treated. So from the beginning until the end of the Madani period, this surah was being revealed in parts. And you want to ask yourself, why is it being revealed in parts like this, and why those different verses were not put in different surahs that were revealed after the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah? After Surah Al-Baqarah began to be revealed, all of the Madani surahs were revealed while Surah Al-Baqarah continued to be revealed, or parts of it continued to be revealed. So why those verses in the different surahs those verses in Surah Al-Baqarah that were later added to Surah Al-Baqarah were not added to other surahs that were being concurrently revealed? Because they belong to Surah Al-Baqarah, which tells us what? Which tells us that every surah is an entity by itself. Every surah is an entity by itself. And therefore, if every surah is an entity by itself, and to the point that some verses are being revealed now in the year 5 after Hijrah, after Ghazwat al-Ahzab, and Surah al-Ahzab was revealed, but those verses were still added to Al-Baqarah and were not added to Al-Ahzab, then we know that every surah is an entity by itself. Then we have to ask ourselves, if every surah is an entity by itself, then every surah has a signature characteristic, a hallmark, a specific theme, a certain thread that connects all the pearls of the surah, or all the ayat of the surah. And in this case, we should be looking for the thread. In this case, whenever we ask ourselves, whenever we remember Surah Ali Imran, then we have to remember something. Surah Al-Baqarah, then we should remember something, and so on and so forth. So we should familiarize ourselves with the surahs and what they are about, and not dive right into the ayat before we are cognizant of what the surah itself is about. So you have to look at the whole picture, the larger picture first. You see Abdullah and Khalid and Khalil and Muhammad and so on, and then you look a little bit closer, and you see Khalid's nose, for instance, and Abdullah's eyes, mustache, etc. But if you get too close, you will not be able to recognize him, because a lot of people shave their mustache, and a lot of people just trim it, and a lot of people leave it. And so if you get too close and just look at the mustache alone, you're not going to be able to recognize who that person is, unless you take a few steps backward and then you look at the entire being, and then you can recognize that this is Khalid, this is Khalil, this is Muhammad, etc. 286 verses, right, in Surah Al-Baqarah. It's the second in the order of the Quran. It's the first to be revealed in Medina, continued to be revealed until the end of the Madani period. It is made out of 286 verses. And if you want to talk about Surah Al-Baqarah, you will have to look at the beginning and the end of Surah Al-Baqarah. Look at the beginning. The first thing of Surah Al-Baqarah is a talk about what? The description of who? Absolutely. it talks about the Quran, and then it talks about those who believe in the Quran, who are the believers, the mu'minun. And then the last verses of Surat Al-Baqarah, and this is quite interesting because this should be shown the translation on the other side. Anyway, you'll believe my translation. The last part of Surah Al-Baqarah is آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير. The messenger and the believers believed in that which was revealed to the messenger from his Lord. Each and every one of them believed in Allah, His angels, His books, His messengers. That is, the speech now is, there is a switch of voice now. That is the believers saying, لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله. We do not distinguish between His messengers. And then they said, وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا, and they said, we hear and we listen and we obey. غفرانك ربنا, forgive us our Lord, وإليك المصير, and to you is the return. And then Allah said to them, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah does not burden a soul beyond its capacity. لها ما كسبت, to it what it earned, وعليها ما اكتسبت, and upon it what it committed. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا. Our Lord, do not take us by what we do out of forgetfulness or error. What is this? This is a description of the believers. This is a description of the believers. So after the surah talked about, after the surah in the beginning talked about the Quran, it talked about the description of whom? The believers. Something very interesting here, isn't it? Okay. We will use this instead. But the other program is somewhat better. So after the surah started by Alif Lam Mim, and we said that those letters at the beginning of the surahs there is a certain wisdom behind them, but we don't exactly know what the wisdom is. It says, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. This is the book. In it is guidance, sure, without doubt, to those who fear Allah. In it there is guidance, sure, without doubt, to those who fear Allah. And then it started to describe الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ, and so on and so forth. And at the end it talked about the description of the believers as well. آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كل آمن بالله وملائكته. So the surah is between the description of the believers and the description of the believers from the beginning to the end. What is the surah about? This is a question for you. What is Surah Al-Baqarah about? Some of you may have read this. What is the thread? What is the common thread in Surah Al-Baqarah? The common thread in Surah Al-Baqarah is man's agency on earth. Al-Istikhlaf, Al-Khilafah, Al-Istikhlaf. Man's being an agent for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this earth. And the whole surah talks about successful and failed models of istikhlaf, of man's agency. So you will find in the first 8 rub'as of Surah Al-Baqarah, you'll find in the first rub' there is the story of not the story, but there is the description of the 3 different types of people. 5 verses described al-mu'minun. These are the 5 verses here. الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. You can read this here. Who believe in the unseen and so on. Then 2 verses described al-kafirun. Right? Here. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. This is the next page. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا سَوَاءٌ عَلَيْهِمْ أَنذَرْتَهُمْ أَمْ لَمْ تُنذِرْهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. As to those who reject faith, it is the same to them whether you warn them or don't warn them. They will not believe. And the second verse describes the disbelievers as well. After those 2 verses, we have 13 verses describing the hypocrites, starting from this one, verse number 8. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَقُولُ آمَنَّا بِاللَّهِ وَبِالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَمَا هُمْ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ. Of the people, there are some who say we believe in Allah and the last day, but they do not really believe. That is a description of the hypocrites. And once the hypocrites were mentioned, we know this is a Madani surah. And why is that? Because there were no hypocrites in Mecca. Why do you need to be a hypocrite in Mecca? You know, the believers are being persecuted left and right, so it doesn't make any sense to be a hypocrite in Mecca. But in the Medina, certainly the believers did have some influence and some power, a state of their own. So that is when hypocrites are expected to happen, or hypocrisy is expected to happen. So now we continue with the verses that describe the hypocrites from verse 8 here until verse 21. 21 is an address to all the 3 different types of people. يا أيها الناس اعبدوا ربكم الذي خلقكم والذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. This one. After the description of the hypocrites in many verses, 13 verses, it said, Ya ayyuhan nas, all you people, adore your guardian Lord who created you and those who came before you, that you may have the chance to be righteous. That you may have the chance to be righteous. After this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the people of the tools that He empowered them with for this function of istikhlaf, being the vicegerent, viceroy, agent, Allah's agent on earth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told them that He subdued the whole universe for them. الذي جعل لكم الأرض فراشا والسماء بناء وأنزل من السماء ماء إلى آخر الآيات. He who has made the earth your couch and the heavens your canopy and sent down rain from the heavens and brought forth therewith fruits for your sustenance, then set not rivals unto Allah when you know the truth. So Allah told them that I am giving you the means to be the agent. I am not giving you this agency without empowerment. The agency comes with empowerment. I have subdued the creatures, the universe for you. Do you see how amazing that is? Do you see how amazing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala subdued certain animals for us, but He left others that are wild. You can't domesticate them to be a sign that it is not you, it is not your smartness, it is not your power. You can subdue an elephant, but you cannot subdue a scorpion, a little scorpion like this. But you can subdue an elephant. We subdue horses, camels, some of the strongest animals. But you can't subdue a little snake, even this big. Or like, scorpion, or one of those. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps those as a sign for us that it is not us who were able to domesticate those and subdue them. It is Allah who subdued them for us. Then anyway, but we will come back because there are certain things that we will need to come back to, by the way, but I'm just showing you in general. Maybe you should, the projector, I'm just move it like this a little bit. Yeah, so I'm showing you the skeleton of the first juz of this surah. Now, if you move on here, and we will come back to the ones in the middle, but if you move on here, this is the second ruba', right? The second ruba' starts here, in Allah la yastahi. In the second ruba' we have the story of whom? Yeah. وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً قَالُوا أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَن يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا. Behold, thy Lord said to the angels, I will create a vicegerent on earth. They said, will you place therein one who will make mischief therein and shed blood, whilst we do celebrate your praises and glorify your holy name? He said, I know what you know not. Okay. So here, that is the first model of agency, which is Adam and Hawa, Adam and Eve. The second ruba' talks about this model. This model did have some transient lapses in the agency, transient defect, but it was quickly corrected. Then we move on to another model. We move on to another model. This is the second model of agency. Who's being addressed here? Likely who's being addressed here by أَتَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبِرِّ are the children of Israel. أتأمرون الناس بالبر وتنسون أنفسكم وأنتم تتلون الكتاب أفلا تعقلون. Here we come to the mention of the people of the book. Prior to this, there was not, prior to this in the surah started by the mu'mineen and then the kafirin and then the hypocrites. The people of the book are coming here. أتأمرون الناس بالبر وتنسون أنفسكم وأنتم تتلون الكتاب. Do you enjoin right conduct on the people and forget to practice it yourselves, and yet you study the scripture? Will you not understand? Or do you not understand? أفلا تعقلون. Now, from this one, which is the third ruba' here, the first is about the division of people. And there is no other division. Believer, hypocrite, and disbeliever. The second is about the agency of Adam and Hawa. Oh, that's... Yeah, no, the third ruba', from the third until the seventh, the talk is about Bani Israel. Why is there so much focus? Because their story is a prototype of failed agency that the believers, failed agency in the most part, certainly of Bani Israel. There were righteous people, there was the generation of Musa alayhi salam, and many of his companions were righteous, and there were righteous people afterwards. But in the most part, afterwards, it was a prototype of failed agency. And the gravest error, mistake, defect in that model is the excessive materialism. That is why this excessive materialism, once it gets a hold of a nation, it destroys it. Excessive materialism. That is why in the surah that talks about istikhlaf, Al-Baqarah, it begins with, in the description of the believers, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ, those who believe in the unseen. Because materialism is all about tangible things. You know, you believe in what you see, and you value what you touch, what you see, what you, like tangible things. Abstract meanings have no much room in your thinking, but you can never succeed. You can never do the right type of vicegerency, agency on earth without believing in the unseen. Because this whole earth was made by Allah, who is in this world unseen to us. And whatever you see of this universe is so limited, extremely limited. Allah may have opened the window for us to see, to understand and appreciate how limited we are. You know, the recent discoveries in astronomy and so on and so forth, and all of the billions of stars and various constellations, etc. This is to show us our, size and our limitation. But unless you believe in the unseen, you're cut off from the guidance of the one who created it all. So the second model of agency, which is in the most part a failed one, is being discussed in detail to show the believers this is what you need to avoid, this is what you need to watch for, from the third ruba until the seventh ruba. So what's there in the eighth ruba? Here is the eighth ruba. وَإِذْ ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ بِكَلِمَاتٍ فَأَتَمَّهُنَّ قَالَ إِنِّي جَاعِلُكَ لِلنَّاسِ إِمَامًا قَالَ وَمِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِي قَالَ لَا يَنَالُ عَهْدِ الظَّالِمِينَ. And remember that behold, when Abraham was tried by his Lord with certain commands, which he fulfilled. That's agency. And he fulfilled the agency. Or the conditions of a successful one. He said, I will make you an imam to the nations, a leader of the nations, an imam to the nations. He pleaded, and also imams from my offspring. Allah answered them, but my promise is not within the reach of evildoers. So this is again a reminder for Bani Israel who used to live with the Prophet ﷺ in Medina, that my promise is not within the reach of evildoers, that just being the descendants of Ibrahim is not sufficient to be successful agents. Successful agency is about this, the fulfillment of the command. Successful agency was described at the end of the surah. سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير. سمعنا, we listened, وأطعنا, and we obeyed. Or we listen and we obey. غفرانك ربنا, forgive us our Lord, وإليك المصير. Okay, now after the 8th rubu', what does Surah Al-Baqarah talk about? You will find the mention of Bani Israel dispersed here and there within Surah Al-Baqarah, but predominantly after the 8th rubu', it's about commands and prohibitions. Basically, the basis of the formation of the virtuous society, of Ummat al-Istikhlaf, al-Ummah al-Jadira bil-Istikhlaf, the Ummah that is worthy of Istikhlaf, the Ummah that is worthy of being Shahida al-Ummam, a witness over all other nations, an Ummah that is worthy of being a leader of all other nations. And now you may think that, how come we're so behind? But we have been ahead for about 1,000 years. We have been so behind in the last 400 years or so. So in the life of in the life of nations, the life of nations is not measured by the life of individuals. So yes, maybe throughout your life where our ummah is behind, but it has not been like this, and it will not continue to be like this, inshallah. So, but even when this ummah is materially and physically behind and below other ummah, it continues to be morally ahead, even if it is way far from the target that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala laid down for it to reach it. Even if they are too far from their target, this ummah continues to be ahead morally and continues to be ahead with regard to the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, accepting Allah's guidance. I said in the khutbah, this is still an ummah that prays 5 times a day, or hundreds of millions of from it pray 5 times a day, shun alcohol, shun obscenity, believe in Allah and the hereafter, and so on and so forth. So like Ibn Hazm said, that al-zuhur zuhuran, zuhuru hujjatin wa bayan, wa zuhuru sayfin wa sinan. فظهور السيف والسنان تارة لنا وتارة علينا وظهور الحجة والبرهان لنا دائما أبدا. That there are 2 different types of prevailing. There is prevailing by the sword and the spear, sayf or sinan, and there is prevailing by the hujjah and burhan, evidence and proofs. The prevailing by the sword and the spear is sometimes on our side and sometimes not on our side, but the prevailing of hujjah and burhan, the proofs, is always ours. That is why if ideologies were left to confront one another, Islam will prevail for sure. Even when Islam when the Muslims are behind materially, Islam continues to spread and continues to gain more and more followers because of this dhuhur al-hujjah wal-burhan, or the prevailing of proofs and evidence. Okay, so the rest of the surah, we will talk about the rest of the surah inshallah next week, but this week we will talk about, we already started talking, we will continue to talk about the first juz of the surah. Like I said, it starts by, after it confirms the source of the guidance after it confirms the source of the guidance that you can draw from to achieve that agency, that istikhlaf, this khilafah on earth, which is the guidance that is revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. This book, there is no doubt in it, a guidance for al-muttaqeen, a guidance for muttaqeen. And then it described some of their major criteria. And it starts by the belief in the unseen. And we said why it starts by the belief in the unseen, because this is vital to achieve. This is vital to have a civilization that is not only material, a civilization that is not only about prosperity, physical prosperity, about power, about wealth, a civilization that mixes between both that physical prosperity and the spiritual purity and moral integrity. Not that human beings will be spiritually pure, like they will be sinless. No, that didn't even happen in the Medina of the Prophet ﷺ. But in general, overwhelmingly, it will be a civilization of moral integrity and spiritual purity. Then it describes that disbelievers, and it describes the disbelievers in 2 verses only. But then it describes the hypocrites in 13 verses. And you want to ask yourself, why? The disbelievers are a lot more than the hypocrites in number, right? The people who reject Islam outright are a lot more than the hypocrites. Shouldn't we get to know a little bit more about them? Why is there so much emphasis on the hypocrites? More dangerous? That is one of them, yes. This was revealed in Medina, yes. Not necessarily, because there were Jews in Medina also in large numbers, so they don't belong to the hypocrites, they belong to the non-believers. They are harder to recognize. They're so complex. They are. We will see how complex they are. They themselves are so unstable in their hypocrisy. Because hypocrisy is a very, very complex psychological phenomenon that will need to be described in detail so that you can recognize it, so that as a believer, hypocrisy is closer to you than disbelief. So you need to be, it is more dangerous to you as an individual believer, because you're closer to hypocrisy than you are to disbelief. That is why Ibn Abi Mulaika said, I have seen 30 of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, all of them feared hypocrisy for themselves, or feared from hypocrisy. So hypocrisy is more subtle and closer to the disbeliever than outright disbelief. So it's more dangerous to you as an individual. The hypocrites within the society are more dangerous to the society, because they sort of like eat on the foundations of the society from within. And in addition to that danger, they are complex. They are complex, and they need to be explained in some detail. The disbelievers are not complex. They just reject. That's it. And they are less worthy than to talk about them more than this. And one more thing. The believers were already quite acquainted with the disbelievers. They have lived for 13 years in Mecca, right? So not all of them were believers from day one, but the da'wah continued in Mecca for 13 years. So this is not a new thing. The disbelievers are not new. The hypocrites are new. So they need to be described in some more detail. So that is why the verses, many verses talk about them. From this verse, if you move down the verses here quickly, it talks about, this verse talks about how they deceive Allah, but they only deceive themselves because no one can deceive Allah. This one talks about the disease in their hearts and how Allah increased it. This one, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ لَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, if they are reminded to not spread mischief on earth, they say that we are the reformists, or we are the good doers. and then Allah belies them. And then here, when it is said to them, believe like the people believed, like the people around you believed, they will have the same characteristics of the Jahiliyyah with them. What are the characteristics of Jahiliyyah? Kibr, arrogance. Because those people are not nukhba, they are not elite. The people who believed in their own assessment are not the most elite from amongst us. Those are the sufaha, and not the elite. Those are the lay persons or lay people, sufaha and foolish. When it is said to them, believe as the people believe, they say, or others believe, shall we believe as the fools believe? Nay, of a surety, they are the fools, but they do not know. So they were not able to get beyond the characteristics of the Jahiliyyah. It is still inside them, even if they externally try to show, otherwise, but it is still inside them. And the diseases of the heart are the last to be cured. أولئك الذين اشتروا الضلالة بالهدى فما ربحت تجارتهم وما كانوا مهتدين. These are the ones who have bartered guidance for error, but their traffic is profitless, or their transaction is profitless, and they have lost true direction. You see, Abdullah ibn Rawaha, it is a transaction between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see, when As'ad ibn Zurara reminded the Ansar in Bay'at al-Aqaba al-Thaniya and the second Pledge of Allegiance in Aqaba, the first and the second, when the people from Al-Khazraj went to the Prophet ﷺ in Mecca and spoke with him and were convinced of the truthfulness of the Prophet, and the second time they brought him other people from Al-Aws and Khazraj, from Al-Medina, from those two big tribes, to speak with the Prophet ﷺ, and 72 of them accepted Islam, and many of them